Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to the September 10th Historic Resources Board meeting. I'd like to have the roll call, please.
Chair Kohler, Vice Chair McKinnon,
Present.
Board Member Bernstein.
Here.
Board Member Bowell.
Here.
Board Member Bunnenberg.
Here.
Board Member DeSiquio. Board Member Wimmer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any oral communications that the public may wish to speak on any item not on the agenda? 3 minutes per speaker. Agenda changes, additions, or deletions?
Staff has none.
Okay, thank you. We have minutes to approve from the July 23rd, 2015 meeting.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes stand approved. We have 3 items on the agenda today. The first one being 425, 429 University Avenue. Request to consider an appeal of the Director of Planning and Community Environments architectural review approval of a 31,407 square foot, 4-story mixed-use building with parking facilities on 2 subterranean levels on an 11,000 square foot site in the downtown commercial CD-C GFP zone district located at 425, 429 University Avenue, and the approval of a mitigated negative declaration, environmental assessment. A draft mitigated negative declaration has been prepared. Do we have a presentation from staff or the
Excuse me, Vice Chair McKinnon. So I have to I have to disclose an issue first.
Okay.
So in April of this year, I provided the applicant, Mrs. Wong, responding to her request for information about the Secretary of Interior standards and guidelines. So I provided information for her on that. And then I talked with the city attorney. To avoid a continual appearance of a conflict of interest, I'll be recusing myself and not participating in this agenda item. I'll be back after the item is complete.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. Proceeding.
Thank you, Chair McKinnon. The item before you is a request for the HRB to review the historic resource evaluation for the subject buildings on the project site, as well as to review and comment on the proposed CEQA analysis, and lastly, to comment on the architectural review finding 4, which would be required to be made for this application. Staff is available to answer any questions, and I believe the the applicant is here to present information as well.
Okay, the applicant will be making a presentation at this time.
Just one question to get on the record. Does the city of Palo Alto have a height limit for buildings?
So this project is on the CDC.
Speak right into your mic.
Speak
Don't
up,
look
please.
at us.
Real loud.
This project is zoned as downtown commercial CDC GFP, and the height limit is 50 feet maximum.
50 feet? Okay, if you please state your name clearly so we can have it for the record.
Good morning. Is this live? Good morning, board members. My name is Jaime Wong. My family owns the properties at 425 and 429 University. Starting in March of 2013, in consultation with the city's planning staff, we commissioned a historical analysis and report from Preservation Architecture to learn what historical resources we had to deal with. The report was submitted to planning staff and the environmental contractors Dudek and Associate, who agreed that there were no concerns regarding the properties in question or nearby historic resources. Planner Matthew Weintraub and Assistant Planning Director Jonathan Late agreed. The proposed project went through several hearings at the ARB level, and they recommended approval on February 19th, 2015. The Director of Planning issued an approval letter February 25th, 2015, which was then appealed. At the City Council hearing on the appeal on May 4th, 2015, Council agreed to continue the appeal by directing us to complete a historic resource analysis, a shadow study, and a traffic circulation analysis of Lane 30 to supplement the extensive traffic report. It also directed a redesign of the project to address specific issues of concern to the Council. On the historic resources issues, the city's planning staff contracted the respected architectural preservation firm of Carey & Company to respond to Council's specific issues. The consultants reported back to staff on August 14, 2015. We are here to answer any questions you may have as you review our proposed development project. We respectfully request that the HRB affirm the findings of the staff report from Palo Alto City Planner Matthew Weintraub to the HRB dated September 10th, 2015, with its supporting attachments. In his report, Mr. Weintraub concludes that the proposed project would not cause a substantial adverse change in the significance of a historical resource as defined in CEQA guidelines, the California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15064.5. I will now review the Council's issues and the staff report findings. Issue A. The Preservation Architecture Report focuses on whether there are criteria for a historic district. There is no need for existence of a district for there to be historic considerations. The HRB should determine whether there are other factors that should be considered. The staff report agrees that specific other factors have been considered by the city's consultant, Carey & Company, in its report, and concurs with the Carey & Company findings that there are no negative impacts based on historic considerations and other factors. The Carey & Company report says, quote, "The larger setting of the Kipling Street properties has been previously compromised. While the group of buildings on Kipling Street may impart character to the street as described in the downtown urban design plan, they do not appear to constitute a potential historic district whose resource setting may be affected." End quote. And then it adds, quote, "Although a number of individual historical resources are located on the avenue, they do not form a historic district. Similar to Kipling Street, the proposed project will not substantially alter the physical environment of the individual historic resources on University, such that their integrity would be compromised to the degree that they would lose their historic significance," end quote. This is a quote from the Carey & Company report, page 10. Issue B. What is the applicable area of potential effect under CEQA analysis? In its study, Carey & Company defined an equivalent study area, as shown in Figure 1 and on this slide, consisting of the proposed project site and immediately adjacent properties. 3 of the properties are identified as historic resources: 423 University, 436452 University, and 443 Kipling. The others are not: 428432 University, 451 University, and 440444 Kipling. Issue C. There are a number of historic structures near, that is on Kipling, one next to the proposed project and several across the street. How will the project impact these structures? Within the study area recommended in Issue B, just discussed, Carey & Company agrees that the proposed project would not have any impacts on historic resources within the boundaries of the study area. Specifically, it would have no direct or indirect impacts on the 3 historic resources just mentioned. Issue D. Whether the mass, scale, and compatibility of the proposed project has an impact on the existing historic properties should be analyzed. Quoting from the city's draft initial study, updated August 2015, page 8, quote, "The use of lighter stone and cast concrete in the building facade and substantial setbacks on the third and fourth floors would help to reduce the apparent massing of the building and improve compatibility with neighboring structures," end quote. Carey and Company evaluated how the historic resources within the study area may be affected by the proposed project on the recognized 7 aspects of integrity. On 6 of the 7 aspects, location, design, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, it found the following, quote, "The proposed project's design, mass, scale, and use of materials could not have an indirect impact on the integrity of historic resources," end quote. This is from Carey and Company report, page 2. The 7th aspect, setting, is considered in issue E following. Issue E, whether the proposed building would change the setting of the historic properties on Kipling Street or University Avenue and have an impact under CEQA. The setting of the historic resources has already been compromised. Carey and Company found that, quote, "The proposed project will not adversely impact the setting of the existing individual resources on Kipling, including 443 Kipling Street. Similar to Kipling Street, the proposed project will not substantially alter the physical environment of the individual historic resources on University, such that their integrity would be compromised to the degree that they would lose their historic significance," end quote. This is from Carey and Company report, page 10. Moreover, the staff report from the City of Palo Alto states that under CEQA, no new avoidable significant effects have been identified as a result of the text and project changes, end quote, from the City of Palo Alto draft initial study updated August 2015, page 2. In conclusion, we, the applicants, would greatly appreciate the HRB reporting to Council your concurrence that the independent preservation architecture consultants chosen by the city, Carey and Company, the environmental CEQA consultants, Dudek and Associates, and staff all agree that from a historic resources standpoint, there is no direct or indirect effect that would harm any historic resource or cause them to compromise their integrity to the degree that they would lose their historic significance. Thank you.
Do we have any comments from the public on this particular project? I guess we can close the meeting then for board deliberations.
Do we ask questions of staff?
Oh, okay. Yeah. We'll have questions from staff. Questions to staff, I guess.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for staff. In reviewing these materials, I noted that the Architectural Review Board uses the land use requirements in their evaluations. And in specifically in policy number 5, it says that these projects should maintain scale and character of their surroundings. And I'm wondering how, first of all, if I'm understanding this correctly, does staff report feel that this project does that?
Thank you, Board Member Bauer. The analysis that's provided to the HRB is not necessarily a full architectural review analysis. In other words, we haven't all the findings related to the architectural review have not been necessarily completed or presented to the HRB. So I don't necessarily have the answer to your question. I believe that's your comment is certainly a comment that could be relayed to the Architectural Review Board. Specifically in reference to the ARB findings, staff believes that ARB finding number 4 is the most relevant to the subject matter that the HRB reviews. And Architectural Review finding 4 relates to whether or not there is an existing area of unified historical or architectural character. and if there is such an area, whether or not the project is compatible. So staff recommends that the HRB may provide comments to the ARB in relation to that specific finding.
So let me follow that with another question. In policy number 6, it says, where possible, avoid abrupt changes in scale and density between residential and non-residential areas, between residential areas, different density. This corner property is effectively a transition between the downtown commercial uses on University Avenue and what used to be residential uses on Kipling. Now Kipling is primarily used as commercial space in their original buildings, mostly original. I couldn't tell whether one of them was actually replaced or not. But I'm still wondering how this is this building doesn't violate or doesn't qualify as meeting that requirement. But I guess it's not. So maybe that's not a question. That's a statement. Let me go one step further. Why does the planning department allow equipment screening to exceed the 50-foot height limit? Why wouldn't that be under the height limit? Why shouldn't it be under the height limit? Is there an exemption?
Do you mind to clarify your questions a little bit? You're talking about the equipment screening?
Right, on top of the
Into
building.
your mind.
Yeah.
Right,
So,
so let me just, for clarity, on page AO 2.1, these are elevations from University Avenue showing a 36 foot 6-inch height limit at the lower part on elevation number 1. Elevation number 2 is a 50-foot height limit. And it's very clear that the building exceeds the 50-foot height limit, and I'm assuming that's equipment screening.
so to your questions, for equipments and including elevator shaft, can exceed the height limit by no more than 15 feet. So that is allowable height exemptions under our code for this particular zone.
So we don't really have a 50-foot height limit, we have a 65-foot height limit. Is that what you're saying?
For utility equipment, yes.
Okay, last question. In the residential side of the planning department, we have, what, a 30-foot height limit on houses, I think? But it's my understanding, at least in the last 10 years when I was building houses, that you couldn't even approach that height. Simply wasn't allowed. Now, you could try, but your project would always be cut down. And so I don't think any house is built to 30 feet at all, unless it's a historic house or it's a remodel. Why does the city allow commercial buildings to not only meet the maximum height limit, but actually exceed it by 15 feet for things that could be incorporated in the design, when on the residential side, it doesn't begin to allow that?
Good morning. This is Jody Gerhardt, interim current planning manager. I think we're coming to you this morning to discuss this project. We have not approved this project as of yet, and so we are asking for your comments on this project. And we will also be going in front of the ARB to have this further discussion about design, scale, massing, stepping down to the neighborhood, things of that nature. So we're very much in the middle of this discussion. And for the HRB, we would ask that you focus on the motion that the council has set forward. And I think to the point that you're getting to is letter D, which is whether the mass scale compatibility of the project has an impact on the existing historic properties. And so we would appreciate your comments related to that. And it is very possible that the project may change based upon your comments.
So one more question. If it changes, does it come back to us? Or is this our only opportunity to do commenting about a project that may morph into something else and not be what we've reviewed today?
The current process right now is that we're asking the HRB to review the council's motion. We will be going forward to the ARB to have them do the same thing, and then we will be going to council. So council will make the final decision, or like they did previously, they will send it back through the system.
Great, thank you.
Beth, you have questions of staff?
I'm wondering why the Kerry report did not look carefully at the architect involved in a number of these historic properties. Burge Clark was the architect for quite a number of these buildings, among them the Varsity Theater, the 452, 436 was Burge Clark. That's the one next to the new Apple building. The former Apple building at 452 to 436 is also a Category 2 Burge Clark. And then that very charming little building, 423 University, is a Category 3 Burge Clark. Do we have any answer as to why this sort of heart of the city was not considered in the Kerry report?
Thank you, Board Member Bunenberg. The historic analysis provided by the consultant actually does look at the properties both within the project site and adjacent nearby. And it does identify that one of the buildings on the project site is actually a Burge Clark work. However, it does not retain integrity, according to the consultant's analysis. It does no longer retain integrity to convey that significance. In other words, it's been altered significantly.
I know that on the site there was a Burge Clark, but
Yes.
I was talking about the surrounding properties.
Thank you. So yes, there are known to be a number of Burge Clark works as well as other types of historic resources in the vicinity of the project site. And those have been included in the analysis of whether or not this project could have potential impacts to those off-site historical resources.
And are those all based on its being a district? Because that's not a particular requirement, as far as I know, in our historic.
So there currently is not an identified district in this area, either on the project site or nearby in the vicinity. So the environmental review analysis did look at whether or not there's a district that could be impacted and determined that there is not an identified district that could be impacted. It also does look at whether or not individual off-site historical resources, such as the Burge Clark works, could be potentially impacted. The consultant's analysis recommends that the setting on University Avenue has been altered over time such that while we may have individual historic resources, there's not a potential district, and that the individual historic resources that are in existence, their settings would not be compromised to a degree that would affect the integrity of those particular resources.
But that would be one of our possible responses, that it might or might not.
Yes, yes, staff is asking for the HRB's review and comment on those specific findings. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any additional questions from staff?
Go ahead, Pat.
Go ahead, Pat.
I just have it's kind of piggybacking on David's question about the height, and you have spoken that it can be up to 15 feet above the 50 for, what, air conditioning or things like that? And how far above is that equipment right now? I mean, is it up to 65 feet, or I didn't see where it exactly says what is the actual absolute height of the building, including any equipment?
So right now, the height for the elevator shaft is up to, I believe, it's less than 15 feet. So when you look at the sheets 0.2.1, it will give you an estimate of how high above the 50 feet limit.
Perhaps the applicant would know the answer to that question.
I don't have an exact dimension, but the screen height would depend ultimately on how much you want to screen. I mean, from the street, you can't see anything because it's set so far away from the edge of the building. So if you want to have a total screening from a building next door that is 50 feet, then you'd have it the same height as the equipment. I don't know what that number would be, but 10 feet or whatever. If you don't want total screening, you can lower that. It's just a screen.
I'd like to know when I could make a comment.
Please state your name when you're at the podium.
Yes, my name is Elizabeth Wong. I am Jaime's wife, and we are the owners of 425, 429 University. And I wanted to bring an issue concerning a comment that Board Member Bauer made.
Yeah.
And Board Member Bunnenberg. Early on, I had approached Mr. Bernstein concerning an issue that which addressed.
Yeah.
I'm
Could
sorry?
you speak up a little bit, please?
Yes, I have a letter from Martin Bernstein, because early on I had a question, about the design and the style of the building, and he wrote a letter for me that I would like to share with you. Could I do that?
But on the diagram, A0.21, there's clearly a 50-foot height limit shown, and portions of the building and must be the elevator shaft are clearly above that 50-foot height limit.
Okay, so concerning the 55-foot limit, no portion of the building is above 50 feet high, except for the the HVAC, which is screened, and that is more above the 55 feet high or foot height, and that is permissible under the code, and that we are not asking for any exceptions to the building codes. So can I comment on this letter? So basically, I was concerned also about the flow of the building from on University Avenue and anywhere, as a matter of fact. And Mr. Bernstein says that the standards and guidelines of the National Park Service, Department of the Interior, allow for new buildings with contemporary architectural styles to be located near neighboring properties that are listed on a local historic register. So we did a lot of research before we embarked in 2.5 years of very, very large costs in order to come up with this building.
Hi, can we go back to the specific buildings that are noted in the report that are of historic substance in this adjoining district? I think it's in the report, the Kerry report, and it seems like that was just really briefly gone over. I know that there's a slide that you had that had the sort of the plan view. Can we just briefly go back to this and identify those surrounding those buildings that were named as had historic merit, and talk about those specific buildings? And I don't know if on some of your graphics, do some of those neighboring historic buildings show up on these graphics? Because one of our tasks is to compare how the new building might impact some of these historic buildings. So it would be nice to have, let's just go back to that point of your presentation and talk about specifically those historic buildings and the nature of those buildings, so we can take a look at that. I know that you have them in plan view, but maybe we can identify each one of those, and if we have any visual images of those, do you think?
I may have, but it was not part of the presentation, so I'd have to look for that.
On the rendering of University Avenue, to the left is 423 University. And
Is that this one?
it is, and yes. And basically, the front of the building is historical, but the rest of the building has no historical character. Nevertheless, that building is historical, and whatever renovations are done to that building has to follow all the historical mandates. The building to the right of 429 University is not a historical building. It's the 451 University. It's the former Apple building.
Oh, across.
Yes. So that one will become a restaurant with a rooftop, and the height on that building will be 36 feet 6 inches high. Unfortunately, I don't have pictures of the other buildings, but the CARI report does say that there is a separation between our building and the other, the historical buildings on Kipling, and by the alley and the street. And that also notes that there is no impact, negative impact from our building into the historic buildings there. Let's see what other buildings are there. 436 and 452 University, they are the charming, well, actually, that is shown in rendering 2. In rendering 2, across University Avenue, to the left of that rendering, you see 436 and 452 University. And those buildings are historical and very, very charming. And let's see, what else, what other buildings you have? So I don't have a picture of 443 Kipling. It is, it looks like a home. It was a former residence. Jaime says it is a residence. But we believe that 429 University complements the area, and it connects and talks to the area, and it fits well in the context of the in the area.
So the most the adjacent, I mean, I guess it's this little building, which is right on University.
Yes.
That's the most critical connection between the new building and this historic building.
Yes.
So that's the most sensitive. We should look at that. I mean, I think that's what we're trying to focus on, is how this new structure impacts these surrounding, and specifically the ones that are named in the report. And this is the one that is the most impacted because it's adjacent to it.
It is so, but I want to point out that there's another building on University Avenue that has the retail store Floor, F-L-O-R. I think it's at 351 University.
Right.
And right next to it, actually, that building and the modern building next to it are one. But in developing it, because I think then it was 351, it was historical, then that building had a 25-foot setback, but the building right next to it is modern. And inside of the two structures, it is they're common areas. I mean, it is one building. So it is.
Here you have this building.
Yeah, and what Jaime points out also is that right next to 436, 452 University, you have a 428 and 432 University, which is over 50-foot modern building. So they are, as shown in rendering number 2.
Which is this one?
Yeah, so the 432 University is a inventory category 2 building. That's the Sushi Rito and the little one-story.
The one across?
Right, across the street.
On University.
And right next to it is the over 50-foot tall Lululemon XL Partners building, which was completed this century, let's say.
Okay.
May I answer Margaret's question?
Sure, Beth, go ahead.
Let's see. Margaret, the Varsity Theater is in there, and it is a Category 2 building on that same side of the street. 452, 436 are Category 2 Burge Clark buildings. Those are the charming little groupings of what used to be an ice cream store and things of that kind. And then you get the new Apple building, which is right there at the intersection of Kipling. Then next to the small building you were talking about at 423, that one is a Category 3, and Burge Clark designed that terracotta front of that little building. Then across the street, across Kipling, the old Apple building is a Category 2, and it is a Burge Clark building. And also 460, 476, which would be next to the Apple building, headed toward Middlefield, is another Burge Clark, and it's a Category 3. So there is a real grouping.
I want to make a correction. I believe that the CARI report does not identify 451, the old Apple building as a historical building, although it has a lot of charm.
Pardon?
451 University. Can you, do you have a list? Anyway.
51.
Board members, if I may, I just want to clarify whether we've closed the public hearing or not. If so, then we need some additional deliberation from the HRB, and the applicant has a chance to speak if you have direct questions for her.
Well, that 451 was the one I was talking about.
So, Board Member Bundenberg, I appreciate the conversation, and this is exactly what we need. The Carey and Company report has a study area in it, and that is the best study area that we believe, and that's what we studied. But if for some reason that study area needs to include additional buildings, then we certainly would like to hear that.
Do we have further questions of the applicant? If not, we'll close the public meeting and go on to deliberations with the HRB. Okay, public meeting is closed and we're deliberating. Okay. Margaret?
Well, I mean, I just think that our task is just to sort of be sympathetic towards the surrounding historic buildings, and we've named those more clearly, which has helped me a lot. I mean, I think that the mass and scale could be a little bit more sensitive, as in this. I think this is the most extreme case, because this building is right adjacent to the proposed project. And I think this seems, I mean, I'm just in mass and scale, it seems to, maybe it could be a little bit more sympathetic to the building. However, I do understand that the applicants always try to maximize the heights that they can, so I understand that as well. I guess my only thing is, I guess I just wish that there was some reference, historic reference that could be applied to this building. Maybe it's in the material, or I know there's a real modern theme that's going on right now, and everyone wants a lot of glass and clean lines. But I think also I just was thinking how with this existing mass and structure, this could be more sympathetic. So maybe it is in the materials, or maybe there's something going on at the street level that has a little bit more texture that responds to pedestrians. Or I remember at one time in Palo Alto, we were trying to infuse an art element. So maybe there could be an art element that's attached to the building, or a medallion or something. I mean, I'm just throwing things out, but it just seems like there could be a layer of historic art or something that could be incorporated into this project that could be sensitive to the location and but also mark this time and place, which is all very modern. So my comment.
We have additional deliberation comments from the board. Beth?
Well, I definitely would recommend expanding the study area. I feel that it is not considering all of the cumulative impacts of this kind of building, this massing, because as we allow buildings to exceed the 50-foot height limit and they become extremely massive, we are setting the pattern, and the cumulative effects will be felt all down the street, that it's okay, you can take out these buildings and build something that is massive, that exceeds the height limit, and it'll go through all right. So I think that it is, in its present form, very large. And now then, just to check, there was reference to stone on the front of the building, and I did not ask about that outer cladding, but Margaret has brought up that. What is the cladding on the front of the building?
I think here's a sample board here, isn't it?
So there is a material board in the front here. So that has reference to that stone materials.
So that, is it this stone mill class, white Portland? Then there's a very shiny one. So what is at the ground floor level? Which one of these is at the ground floor level?
So I would direct these questions to the applicant so they can further explain their design for the facade treatment.
Sorry, I didn't ask earlier.
Okay, so this material board has been changed, but the Neo Paris, which is the white crystallized material, is mostly the first floor, and this has been approved by the ARB. I wanted to add that this building, that we own the Apple building at 340 University Avenue, and we are very much sensitive to the requests that retailers have for buildings. And so this building, it is made in the modern style. And so this is, we did ask many people, including Mr. Bernstein, if we can put a modern building there, and we were assured that we could. Furthermore, the building meets every code. It does not exceed the building heights. It abides by every building height. And as a result of the City Council hearing on May 4th, 2015, we revised the building so that the third floor is 9 feet away from University Avenue, It is 7 feet 9 inches from Kipling Street, and the fourth floor is 39 feet from University Avenue and over 12 feet from Kipling Street. There's no other commercial building that has been approved and built that does this. This is the first building that sets the setbacks, at the upper floors. So I want also to remind you that there are many examples downtown where historical buildings coexist next to each other with modern buildings.
Pardon for the interruption. We would ask the applicant to just respond to the direct questions of the board. Thank you.
Yeah, but where is this matte finished stone?
Yeah, the matte finish is on the second floor. So this building is a play on different shades of whites, and it has chrome doors, and it just, to me, it screams elegance.
Have they seen the material board? Is that easy?
Sure.
And let's see, other sorts of things. There is a kind of rhythm on the street of columns and then a bit inset small businesses and then another column, and you have picked up that rhythm, but whether there is a way to then emphasize the horizontal lines and make them different or have some pattern to them, something that would tie in more with the historic character. I have still major concerns about the massing and the scale.
Okay. You're through with your questions to the applicant? Okay, we'll be back to deliberations of the HRB.
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, one more question.
Yes.
Hold it.
If I can understand this, and maybe I can't, so I'd like if you could embellish. On the fourth floor, this is where the height limit we were talking about. It's for the whatever mechanical, the elevator, but if it shows that there's 2,000 square feet of residential and 2,000 square feet of commercial, can I presume that only the 500 and something square feet where it says that's the stairs and the shaft, is that the only area that exceeds 50 feet? I mean,
yeah,
is the rest?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think I have
Because that's a small area compared to.
Yeah, the only area that exceeds is for the HVAC and utilities.
The what?
The air conditioning, heating, equipment that is up in the roof, that is above the 50 feet. There's nothing else above 50 feet.
There actually, on your drawings, there is a section of the
Elevator
mechanical
shaft,
screening.
you're right, because that is also allowed by code.
But there is, this section here that is above, which is part of the building.
Right, you're absolutely right. The stairs is not, above 50 feet, but the elevator shaft is above 50 feet, and that is allowed by code.
Could I make a comment and ask board members to look at page A3.1 and A3.2, because this is relevant to the particular discussion. If you look at A3.1, the elevation number 1 at the bottom of the page is the University Avenue front elevation, and there is a 50-foot height limit, and all of the screening that is above 50 feet, it's in the darker area. I don't know if you can get that up there, but that's, it's more than half the building, it looks like. I'm not scaling it. Now, when you look at the elevation number 2 above, which is from Kipling Street, that is a screened portion still above 50 feet, but much smaller. And then if you look at the following page, which is essentially the same, so we don't need to look at that. But the point, the reason I bring this up is that's a substantial amount above the 50-foot elevation, and that's what the question was, I think.
Yes, thank you.
May I make a comment? If we refer to page A 2.7, that is the roof plan, and the area that is above the 50 feet is just the little area where you see the circles. The equipment is shown. It's just that in the rendering of the front of the building, you have to show the entire thing.
No, I understand. Look, and that's where elevations, drawings of this particular, a building help us see what the building looks like. That's all. I know exactly what's going on, and I'm not arguing one side or the other. I'm just trying to point out to the board members just exactly what the scope of that screening, which exceeds the 50-foot limit, is.
Significant.
You probably, from university, you wouldn't see the screening, just in the perspective, even if you were across the street. I think it's far back. It's further away from university, and it is allowed by the city. So.
Yeah, I perfectly understand all of the parameters of this discussion. It's just that, well, I'll make that comment later.
Okay, we're returning to closing the public comment portion of the meeting, which we had reopened, and we're back to board deliberations.
I agree with what's been brought up. That I'd like to see a little more detail. When we're sitting here and we say 423, 452, that all these are Category 2 and 3 buildings, it would be good to actually see these buildings, and are they still enough original, not altered, that they truly are Category 2 and 3 buildings, because it seems like there's a lot more than have been previously identified. And there was so much material, and in one of the part of the Kerry report, it said this one's no longer, it's been too altered, this one's been too altered, and it didn't sound like there are as many, near this project. But I think that needs more close review from us. Also, the building that was Swain's Music, the old Apple building, has that building remained it was not altered that greatly before Apple went in there? I can't remember when it was Swain's and it was more.
It was not, it is, in fact, I would like to compliment you on the Apple building that used to be Swain's Music Store with the colored tile. And you added a portion at the very back, and it left the building, as far as I can tell, very intact. And so that building is in, to my mind, very good shape. I remember when it was reviewed. And so that to get that same kind of sensitivity to the street would, in my mind, be a great asset.
Can I make a correction?
Yeah. I had one additional comment to add to this discussion about study area or area potential effect, as it's known in federal historic preservation areas. My opinion is it's pretty unduly limited in this analysis right here, and I think it could be legitimately characterized as being a much larger area than it currently is described here. I would say that any historic buildings within eyesight of this should be included in the area of potential effect, or the study area. And we've let some of these buildings, with the definition that the consultant has provided, is not necessarily what I would agree with. I think it should be looked at again, and I would say that it probably should be expanded to include some of the historic structures that have been mentioned by the other members of this board. Generally, things that are within eyesight of this project should be considered to be within an area of potential effect for further review by the historic board.
I have, I don't know if anybody else has this feeling, but the building, I think, from the color board of the materials that have been selected, I think it even stands out. It is stunning, but it's such bright light colors that aren't seen on much of downtown Palo Alto, other commercial buildings, original buildings, and even some of the newer ones. So the building would even stand out more.
Well, you know, just like the Apple building.
We are back into deliberations
Sorry,
right now.
sorry.
We're not into comments on the public meeting, so you'll have to,
Sorry.
does the board want to? We're still commenting, so we'll hold off on your comments. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I might be taking a step backwards here, but I just wanted to review the process and where we're at, because it looks like the reason why this project has been brought to us because it was appealed. I think it looks like it had been through an ARB meeting and approval, and then it says that there's an appeal was received. So someone, maybe, can we get a little bit more information on that? Sorry, I should have asked that already.
So this is a major ARB project. The subject area is not a category building, so that's why it never get deferred to the HRB for comments and review. The reason why it is presented to you today is as per council directions, as a response to an appeal for this approvals. So that's why you're here today to discuss specifically what council asked for, which is listed in the report. There's a list of items that council weighs as a concerns and would like the HRB to discuss and provide recommendations to staff to proceed. And then we will share your findings with council for their final decisions.
So what's been presented today was the same project that was appealed, or has the project evolved since the appeal came in?
So just to provide a little bit more history, the project was approved, tentatively approved before, and the appeal kicked in. Concerning with like 4 specific questions. One is massing and scale, compatibility with the historic context nearby, traffic, as well as the loss of retail space. Council conduct a public hearing on May 4, 2015, and as a motion of that hearing, it directed the applicants to redesign the projects, and also refer the new projects to the HRB and ARB for comments before it presents to council. So you are here today to look at the revised project because the applicants provide a design response to the appeal as well as to council's comments.
I would like to read off the questions that have been asked of the HRB so that we can make sure that we're clear here. Not home? Nobody home right now.
Just lift it up.
Lift it up.
Continue, Chairman.
Okay, what is being asked of us, the Preservation Architect Report, Attachment B, focuses on whether there are criteria for a historic district. There is no need for existence of a district for there to be historic considerations. The HRB should determine whether there are other factors that should be considered. B, what is the applicable area of potential effect under CEQA analysis, also known as study area? C, there are a number of historic structures nearby, e.g. on Kipling, one next to the proposed project and several across the street. How will the project impact these structures? D, whether the mass, scale, and compatibility of the proposed project has an impact on the existing historic properties should be analyzed. E, whether the proposed building would change the setting of historic properties on Kipling Street or University Avenue and have an impact under CEQA. That's what's being asked of us, those things. So there is questions about the definition of the study area, AKA area potential effect. There's questions about adjacent historic properties. Just so everybody's on the same page here.
So, Acting Chair, if I may, I'd like to first introduce myself. I'm Jonathan Late. I'm the Assistant Director for the Planning Department.
Okay.
And I wanted to appreciate the conversation that you're having. I want to make sure that we're crystal clear in what we're giving back to the council, so that you absolutely did. And so when we talk about expanding the study area, it would be helpful if some guidance was given. I heard a comment about every potentially historic structure in visual range. I didn't know if there were some other perspectives about what that boundary ought to include. So if there can be some, otherwise we're going to go back and we'll study some areas, and if we came back, you'd say, well, you didn't study the right areas. We wanted to go to this street, or so. If we can understand what that expansion of the range needs to be, that would be helpful in our further analysis. And so maybe that's a conversation that the board can have. And then as you read off each of those areas, I just want to make sure that we're in agreement that for some of these areas, like the first one, does the board agree that there's no basis for a district at this location? And if there is agreement about that, the second part of that question is, are there other features or criteria that ought to be considered? And I heard mentioned the architect, who the architect of some of the buildings in the area might be a consideration for us to look at the Birch-Clark architecture. So if there's agreement on that, that's the kind of feedback that we would like. And so it might be worthwhile just to kind of go point by point with that discussion.
I don't think we should be putting words into the mouth of the council. It's exactly what they asked us for right here. There's no further need for elaboration.
Well, but we want to respond to the question, though. We want to give them a response to the question.
Okay.
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to form a consensus here.
Fantastic.
I wasn't going to make any comments about districts because I thought the other board members had, but I would, in light of your suggestion, I would think that the study area should be from 432 University, which is the new completely inappropriately scaled building, next to the Birch-Clark buildings. It then run the entire length of that side of the street all the way down to Cowper. Those are all, I think Beth just articulated that Birch-Clark was involved, and certainly it's in the Birch-Clark style. The other side of the street from Cowper working back on University, I don't think has much significance in terms of our history as a city until you get to the Swain Music Building, which was the old Apple building. But then going down Kipling, I would go all the way down to Lytton. Not all those buildings are original buildings, but many of them are. One of them I was dragged to as a child by my mother so that she could purchase buttons and notions at Irma Schwabel's place. And those people who've been here a while, we have to be here for quite a while, but she was a fixture of downtown Palo Alto. And that building still exists, pretty much untouched on the outside. Coming back the other way, I don't know, there's obviously nothing in the parking lot that would make any sense to consider. Parking lot is new. But there is the building that Zabibo, the former Zabibo restaurant is in. I don't know if that was considered historic. It was certainly wrapped with a lot of new construction when they created that restaurant. Coming back down on University, subject property would obviously be in this district. And then you come down to, I don't know, I think whatever.
432 covered?
I think this is, I don't know what this building is. We reviewed this building here, I think, didn't we? So I think these two buildings, one of them, well, anyway, so that would sort of be the space that I would consider, because this property really overlooks all of that space. And when I was walking around the street yesterday looking at these properties, I was dumbfounded. I never did like 432 University. I didn't understand why a 50-foot building would be built immediately adjacent to these historic buildings, but you can see from this rendering just how awful that is and how overwhelming it is to the Burge Clark buildings. That's exactly what I think the council is asking us to consider, and I think it's a long overdue consideration. So does that give you enough scope for at least my sense of the district? I can talk to you afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think I have a sense for it. It might be helpful just to refine it. And I guess I'd ask the other board members if there's general agreement to that boundary that you've contemplated.
Well, we could get to that in a motion.
Okay.
Well,
which is where I think we're
in terms
going.
of general agreement, though, there is one more Burge Clark, which is next to the Old Apple building, which is 460, 476. And we can't see that on our diagram, so I'd certainly include that.
So is there general consensus amongst the board that the consultant's definition of the study area potential effect is not accurate?
Well, it's not inclusive enough is the way I would
Not
describe
inclusive enough?
Yeah, I agree that even on that diagram, I mean, there's that intersection of Kipling and University, but it really cuts out the area that's diagonal, which is the University Theater. Excuse me, the Varsity Theater.
And then all the way down to the president.
Yeah, so I think that, for me, that area, for some reason, is being excluded, and I think it should be considered.
Yeah.
So, can I continue?
Sure.
All right, so, as I have said earlier, my most serious concern about this project is that its mass and scale is not compatible and sympathetic to the surrounding buildings. And I started by reading the land use number 5, I don't know what you call that, suggestion, definition, where scale, should maintain scale and character. Even when I looked at the Swain building, the Old Apple building yesterday, and imagined this building, there's a 50% height increase over that, at least on these plans, where we have a 36.6 foot elevation. And I don't know whether that's the current elevation or whether that's the proposed new elevation when the restaurant goes in. But we're going 19 feet over that roughly to the top of the screen. So, do you want to comment?
Yeah, please, if I may. So, part of the reason we're looking at the study area is to understand under CEQA if there is an impact of the proposed building to the adjacent potentially historically significant property. So I want to come back to the study area in a moment, but your more recent comments about how the proposed project is, the mass and the scale of it is, you find it detrimental to and I don't want to put words in your mouth, and so tell me if I'm wrong, but detrimental to the
Overwhelming?
adjacent.
Overwhelming
to
is the
adjacent
word that I
structures.
was thinking of?
Well, the words are dominant,
Okay,
and the other words are feeling and association
Right.
okay.
that
So-
are imparted to the historic properties.
Exactly.
So that's the aspects of historic integrity that are impaired.
In this rendering, you can see that the 50-foot, on the opposite side of the street, this 50-foot building minimizes the historic structures.
Sure.
It shrinks them in value, in size, and I would say, there's another comment I wanted to make, that it encourages the overwhelming increase in the size of buildings, and we have seen this all along University Avenue.
Okay, and if I can interject right there. So I want to make a distinction between a broader policy conversation about development, the scale of development to adjacent structures, and which is a community conversation that we're having now, and this particular project that's proposed to historic resources. And so I heard the feeling that I heard the comment that there's a feeling and association that due to the size and the scale of the proposed structure that it minimizes that impact. And is that an impact to a historic resource under CEQA? Because our finding with our consultant is that the proposed project does not result in a significant impact under CEQA, which is a distinction that I think needs to be made to a broader compatibility conversation, which the ARB and the City Council will be having. We're looking to this board as our historic professionals to comment on the historic impact. And if it's helpful, we can have our consultants speak more to the conclusions from the CEQA perspective, if that informs the board. I clearly hear a concern about the compatibility of the proposed project to the adjacent structures. And as a corollary to that conversation, as we talk about the study area, so we tried to define the study area as those buildings that would most likely be potentially impacted by the proposed building. If we expand the study area, and we're going to Lytton, for example, now, what we're trying to figure out is how does the proposed building impact the buildings down by Lytton on Kipling from a CEQA perspective, from a historic impact perspective. And so what our conclusion has been, and I apologize for being long-winded about this, is that our base conclusion is we're not able to find a historic impact under CEQA. And if we can't find that, and so we're asking you, did we look at everything right? Because maybe if we looked at something else, maybe we would conclude that there's a historic impact, but that's what we need your expertise on and your guidance on. Did we cover everything to definitively rule out that there is not a CEQA impact? There's a whole other conversation about compatibility that I understand, but I think that's for the ARB and the City Council.
So if we're not here to address compatibility of a new building to an historic structure, which is what this board does the last 9 years I've been on it, and I'm the second youngest person on this board, I'm, I guess, confused. I understand CEQA. I've been to a couple of seminars. In fact, I think I've been to 3 now. It's a very complicated law, and I am reluctant to visit that on any property owner because I think it's expensive and I don't think it benefits us. If that's the only tool we have in the city of Palo Alto, and it's not the only question the council's asking us, it's just one of the questions, then I would say, I guess I would answer that by saying that the area considered was too small and that the impact of this new building on the historic structures wasn't adequately analyzed. And let me point out exactly what I mean by that. On page P7 of the Preservation Architecture Report, they list 6 characteristics that the California Register for Historic Resources uses to analyze a building or a property or a historic structure. Could be park too. Under number 3, the structure or site is an example of a type of building which was once common but is now rare. They say This is a kind of building that is common, and so it should be exempt. This kind of building in Palo Alto is becoming almost extinct. It is rare, in my opinion, and I think you could consider that even though it's completely modified from its original shape, the single-story, single full-depth retail, commercial, really commercial space doesn't exist very many places in the city of Palo Alto, in the downtown area. So I have a problem with that. That wouldn't by itself make this an historic structure. But number four, the structure or site is connected with a business use for which was once common but is now rare. Again, I think you could argue that these small businesses, Shady Lane has been in this building forever. I mean, since the early 70s, that's a substantial number of years on anybody's record. So I think that I have problems with this analysis. Now, that's just everybody can write their opinion, and that's what this is. So under these two categories, I think you could come to a different conclusion.
And thank you for that, because that's exactly the kind of feedback, that precise feedback that we're looking for. If it's okay with the acting chair, I'd like to give staff an opportunity to respond to that so that there can be an understanding of why we reached the conclusions that we reached.
Proceed.
And I'd like Matt to respond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, board members. Just in terms of the criteria that you were looking at, those are actually the local ordinance criteria, and those are not actually required to be considered under CEQA. CEQA does not require resources to be evaluated at the local criteria if they're not already designated such. So that information is provided, I believe, for your benefit for information, but those criteria don't actually define historical resources under CEQA. Also, just to clarify that there are two regulatory frameworks that apply here that the board is being asked to look at the compatibility of the project in relation to historic resources. Those two frameworks are CEQA and the architectural review findings, specifically architectural review finding 4. So the question was put forth, what is the board being asked to do in terms of evaluating the compatibility, and it is in relation to the thresholds and the review requirements of those two frameworks. That's what's being asked of the board. In relation to the CEQA study area, I'd like to provide some clarification on that. If I would refer you to the carrying company report that was produced, the study area that was, or I should say, a preliminary study area that was looked at includes all of the areas that the board has mentioned. It looked at a 2-block stretch of University from corner to corner. It looked at a full 1-block stretch of Lytton from University to the next street over. I apologize for not having that in my mind. The bottom line is the carrying company report actually does include an analysis of that larger area, and from that analysis concludes that a more detailed study area is the appropriate study area that's been put forth, which is the adjacent properties. So I just want to put out there that the analysis does include those areas, and it steps through it in a certain way that screens out certain resources from having no potential impact from the property. I would point out that the purpose of CEQA analysis is not necessarily to identify and evaluate every historical resource within X distance of a project. It's to gather enough information to come to a conclusion for environmental review purposes. And that's what we feel the carrying company report has done successfully. Thank you.
Okay, I think, Beth, you had a... You're up.
Are we allowed to respectfully disagree?
We are definitely asking for your comments.
And I was looking and thinking, since we've been talking about Kipling, and we really have in some ways not discussed Kipling that much, and looking at the rear of the building, there are balconies and pieces very, very near the alley, or whatever name you choose to give it. And all those places would be definitely very visible from Lytton, because they're low buildings on that, so that there's not much stepping back from the alleyway to begin to make that part of the building attempt to disappear like the front part of the building. It's pretty well built out to that back alley, is that correct?
So to respond to your comments, when you look at the rendering, which is the one you have in hand, for link 30 and the intersections
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
The intersections between link 30 and Kipling Streets, the buildings strategically put a lower massing and transitions into the nearby lower density buildings. The intent is to respect the nearby smaller structures. And also there is some differentiations in color to differentiate or lighten up that corner. And as you see approaching to link 30, there is a landscape planters and a lobby area with great transparency that trying to address this interactions between the block. The building itself is set back from link 30 by approximately 3 feet, which is not required, but the applicants intend to do so to respect the lower or smaller buildings nearby. So this is the design approach that the applicant choose to do, and I'm pretty sure he's here or she's here to add to it, but that is the rationale that was provided to staff when this proposal was moving forward.
Thank you.
Are we ready to summarize our findings on this in the form of a motion?
Is there a moment that I can make some comments after hearing all that?
Would the board care to reopen the public hearing? Okay.
Okay, I feel that this project is being evaluated as all the other projects that come before you that are historical in nature. This project is only here because there was an appeal. Many of the things that you are raising about changing the guidelines for development, I do appreciate. And I think that, as Mr. Weintraub said, and Mr. Late said, is being taken in the comprehensive plan and many discussions in the city. I think that for a person who has put 3 years of my life into this project and hundreds of thousands of dollars into this project, I have to conform with the existing codes. And the existing codes allowed me to build a modern building, 50-foot height, and respecting, trying to make as much as I can to respect the flow of the street, to make it pedestrian-friendly, to have a transition from Kipling to University. My second comment is that University Avenue is very, very different from one building over, one alley over. So this building fits into University Avenue. It would not fit into Ramona Street, which is a historic district. We have a historic building at 532, 536 Ramona, which is a very charming historic building, and we would never do this to the Ramona address. So we understand what the laws are, and we conform with every law and that was imposed on us, and that was reviewed by the city. The city gave its formal approval to this project after one pre-ARB hearing, 3 ARB hearings, where there was extensive changes to the project. So we, at every stage, we responded and gave to the city what they have asked us to do. Even at this moment, we responded to council's request to set back the 3rd and the 4th floor. So, we had Preservation Architecture look at this. We had Dudek, which is a city consultant, look at this. We had the city's historic planner look at this. We had the city's director look at this. And yet, after all this, the project was approved. It was appealed. As a result of the appeal, they made us do shadow studies, circulation analysis studies, historic analysis, in context historical analysis, all of which we have done. I think is punitive, and I think Mr. Bauer and other HRB meetings, I have heard him say that he was concerned about the cost that each one of these projects and each one of these requests burdens on the project. And I mean, this is insane. This project should have never come here. If it comes here, it should not be analyzed as a historical project. We did every analysis. We did not choose the historian, except for Preservation Architecture per city. That was the norm that we do. The first one, it was our consultant. After that, the city chose the consultant. We have nothing to do with it. And the consultants came back and said, this building has insignificant impact. As I mentioned to you before, there are many examples in the city where there are modern structures next to historical structures. If you would like to reset the development environment, I have no problems with that at all. But this project started in 2013, and it has to go under the laws, the codes that were present from then until now. I think it's totally unfair for the project to be submitted to the strict historical guidelines that you are putting forth at this time. Furthermore, I don't think that council is asking you to go beyond what they have requested. The Kipling Street buildings, as far as studies are concerned, and to make it beyond what it is. I think it borders, I should have my lawyer here, it borders on the illegal. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you. We I think our charter here is to respond to the 5 questions that the council has asked of us. And we're pretty much adhering to that guideline. And there are questions that council asked us about what is the area of applicable potential effect. So we're legitimately responding to those questions that have been asked of us. So we're not trying to make up stuff that adds to this. We're just responding to what we've been told to give to the council. We're closed in deliberations right here. So I'd like to have a motion somewhere from one of the board members that responds to the 5 questions that council has asked of us, which are on the front page of the staff report. We can take them one by one, or we can do them all as a total, but.
I think we've concurred that it doesn't have to be a district, but there are a significant number of historic properties within what's number 2, the area of potential effect. And I believe we have concurred that that area should be at least more closely defined or specifically mentioned, that they still are on the register for the city.
May I speak? I think it might be helpful to take these one at a time. Let's do a resolution for A, B, C. I mean, if we define that a couple of them can be combined, that's fine, but for the first question, should the HRB determine whether there are other factors that should be considered? I think we've heard today from all of us that we think there are other factors that should be considered, and those factors are the effect of this project on other historic properties, even those not on a register. And when I say effect, I'm not talking about architecture, because there's no issue for me, and I probably think any of the board members, about what the architecture of the proposed building is. In fact, it has to be, if it were a project, if this were a historic building we were considering an addition or modification to, it would have to be differentiated, and I think this is certainly differentiated. So there's no issue for me, and I didn't hear any issue from any other board members about the style of architecture. That's not an issue here. I think what I have heard is that the massing and the volume of the building will have a distinct impact on the historic structures. If for no other reason, when you're in this new building, you will be looking down on all the others, and it's overwhelming. I felt overwhelmed by the building at 432 University. So I think that's a significant issue. So I don't know how you put that into a motion, but I guess that we do feel that there are, the motion is that board feels there are other factors, as I maybe articulated one.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think that's, as far as your motion, what's helpful, I like your idea of taking, each point, A through E, and having and talking about that. We can get your comments on that. I don't think it'd be helpful at the end if we can just get a general nod of the board members that yes, that captures our sentiments, and then we can transmit that to the council.
All right, so maybe a discussion of the 5 points.
Yeah, so I think we've got, so unless there's any further to add on, I thought I heard mention something about the architect for those buildings as maybe being another criterion.
Right, right.
That's one that I heard.
Yeah. The buildings we're concerned about are primarily Burge Clark designed buildings. And Burge Clark is a significant presence, had a significant role in Palo Alto's building history and development. On the second one, I'm not sure what the applicable area of potential effect is. I think we talked about how we would like to see the number of buildings evaluated, be expanded, the area. I made a suggestion, maybe board members have other thoughts, but it's basically Cowper to, on the southeast side of University, it would be the corner of the present building all the way down to 532, which is clearly not historic. On the other side of the building, I think, Beth, you had...
Yeah, it was from 476.
So 476, well, that's the southeast side. That's the varsity. It's the other side, the odd numbered buildings. Odd addresses.
Oh, you're still talking
Isn't it just
about
this?
that side.
It's like what you
Yeah,
have.
from the President Hotel
To 432, which is the new building.
Yeah.
Now, on the other side of the street is Swain's, the old Apple building, Swain's Music Building. Is that the northeastern extent?
Well, no, on that side, there is 476, which is also for
Okay. Excuse me, so we go 476, well, no, that's still on the even side. We need to be on the odd side. Talking about,
Here's some numbers here.
yeah, so what's Swain's address? 451, okay, so you could leave 451 on University down to 423. I can't remember what the next building next to 423 is.
Well, let's just put it in.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, and then down Kipling
Right, and Kipling
to
extended.
this building second from the corner of Lytton. I don't think the corner building on Lytton would be considered
Not this corner.
an original, and it's effectively the northwestern side of the Kipling Avenue, 443, 51, and down. And then if you look at Zabibo, I don't know whether that would qualify. You just look in the planning records. I doubt that it does. So that is that's where the potential effect would be. So I think that actually answers C as well. Potential effect and then number of historic structures. D, mass scale and compatibility of the proposed project has on the existing historic properties. I think we've beaten that one to death.
So I'm sorry, just to be clear on that comment, on D, where some of our other points that the council's asked us to consider are a CEQA-related threshold, D is not. And it's a comment about whether the mass and scale is compatible with the existing historic properties that are analyzed or in this area. So your comments about compatibility and dominating, I think, are focused mostly on this this particular item, D.
Anybody else want to chime in?
I guess in terms of the massing and scale, I mean, I definitely think that this building is more sensitive than the bad example across the street. But also, I think there's this ongoing conflict about what the zoning laws allow in these situations. I mean, any building owner wants to max it out just for economic reasons. They want to go as high and as big as they can. And I guess if we struggle with that because we want these buildings to be more pedestrian friendly and less looming over the single-story historic buildings, but that's not what's written in the code, you know. So it's a conflict. It's an internal conflict, you know, within all the entities under the umbrella of the city of Palo Alto. You know, we want to fight for these historic buildings and have everything be sensitive to it, but that's not necessarily what's described in what the capability or what the realm of possibility is in these projects. So, but I think just speaking to that, I think that's our duty, is to try to be extreme in wanting everything to be sensitive to these buildings, knowing that that's not in reality always going to happen, but at least we can make the scale tilt a little bit that way.
Sure.
That's what I think we hope to do.
I actually agree with you. I think that we have a difficult task here because we're trying to evaluate this development project as it affects the historic properties that surround it. And we have a planning ordinance that is applied, I think is the right word, in what I would consider a rather peculiar way. I, again, said earlier, I've been in the residential building business my entire career. And we can't begin to build to the height limit in a residential area. But in the commercial areas, you can build over it. And I just don't understand that. And I don't understand why it doesn't. Maybe it says you can put equipment, HVAC equipment, elevator shafts through that limit. Obviously, you're doing it because it's legal. But why can't we build houses up to the height limit? That's not, it doesn't say any place in the planning or zoning ordinance that you can't do it. It's just impossible to get a permit to do it. So the message I'd like to send to the council is let's start applying the zoning ordinances in an absolutely even-handed way. I looked at the elevations of this building. The first floor is 15-foot ceilings. You don't need 15-foot ceilings in a building. You could take this building down below the 50-foot height limit with modest changes to the interiors of these structures. We do houses with basements, and we put everything in 9-foot spaces. All the plumbing, all the electrical, and you could do it in a commercial building. So I don't want to get distracted here, but this is why we're talking about mass and applicability to the historic structures. It's because there's a feeling in the community, I think, based in the last city council election, that we need to start paying attention to the ordinances that are in place and maybe change them. This building isn't going to be changed substantially, I think, and it would be unfair to the owners if it was. You don't start a process and then have to redo it in the middle. The time to do this, and the reason the council has come to us, is to get information that will help them, I hope, change these ordinances and start downsizing the buildings, which the community seems to want. Now, that's way too much, and I apologize for going on.
Yeah, just to add to that, the cumulative effects that Beth brought up are a consideration too that should be included in the planning department. I think that's totally overlooked.
So, did we get close to giving the council something to think about?
Thank you. I appreciate the board's attention to this. I don't know that we had any concluding comments on item E, or maybe they are already incorporated in the remarks that you've already made, but I just want to make sure that we're not missing that if you wanted to speak to that issue.
And Pat, did you want to say something?
Well, I think we've kind of, I think you were discussing A, B, and C.
Well, D,
as to-
actually, I was actually on D.
D,
Which
D
is
as
mass
well.
scale and
And
compatibility.
yes, and I even think the use of the materials should be looked at with the compatibility with the other surrounding buildings on University. And I think the answer to number E is, yes, it does change the setting for the many historic properties surrounding this project. And it does have an impact.
So when you get to DE, number E, whether the proposed building would change the setting of the historic properties on Kipling University and this is the important part, have an impact under CEQA. I think actually that's a coupler.
It does.
And I don't know that that actually would be the case, because CEQA has its own requirements. It's very tough, very specific. So I don't know whether this board can make that connection.
Well,
I think we all feel it would change the setting, but when you add the under CEQA part.
That changing of the setting, I think, is captured under letter D of the council's direction to the HRB. And I think what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the board members present, there's a unanimous perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the proposed building is overwhelming. It dominates the adjacent structures. I heard a comment about the materials not being compatible with the adjacent structures. And from that perspective, there's an impact. It may not be a CEQA level impact, but there is an impact, and there is a concern about the proposed building to the setting and the adjacent buildings. Is that a fair representation of the board?
Yeah, feeling, association, setting, dominance, those are the key words.
Okay. And the reason I didn't use those keywords is because those relate to a CEQA, I think an analysis under CEQA.
Well, they relate to the 7 aspects of historic integrity,
Which is a criteria under CEQA. So I was just, but yes, we can forward that perspective as well. I was making a distinction between the technical CEQA and the other aspects of it, but we can incorporate that comment as well. Does that capture your perspective as well?
Feeling association.
In terms of the dominance of the building and the materials?
Yeah, to the adjacent buildings.
I mean, I think I've sort of expressed my opinion, but I think also that's something that the ARB tends to look at more critically than our board does.
Okay.
I would just defer to their expertise, but I think, and I know that the applicant has worked hard on the exterior and thinks that this is a good solution for the building. So, I mean, I always like to have it a little bit more, less streamlined and modern, but that just seems to be the theme of the day, so. But I do think that, I mean, I hope that the ARB studies that a little bit closer.
Yeah, I think as you brought out, David, some of these buildings that are affected are examples of building once common, but now rare.
Also, in terms of thinking about the Secretary of Interior standards as well, it certainly affects the setting in a major kind of way for a much larger area than, because it is so tall, so much bigger,
Seven aspects of the story.
that the setting is affected. I think that anything that could mitigate or make it look smaller, such as emphasizing the horizontal banding, as you said, more like the streamlined modern, could help a bit, but it's still very massive and will
It's like a beacon.
greatly change this whole end of University Avenue.
Do you need that put in the form of a motion?
You know, I guess if we can just get concurrent, it'd be nice to be able to report to the council that the comments that you have just articulated in going through A through E is reflective of the board's comments. And if you can just vote to that and.
I'll pose that question to the board right now.
Fantastic.
Does everybody support those comments?
Do we need to have formalize a sentence or a paragraph, or is?
So if I can assist, so let's do that, and let me see if I can help you with that.
So, okay.
And so the motion would be, and if you
So
agree.
maybe should we just say, I move to expand the study area of the potential effect to include towards the end of university, and I know, but we're trying to formulate it all in one, to include to Cowper Street, and then also have the ARB take a closer look at the materials in terms of the context, and I don't know.
Thank you for that. Can I, before we get too far from the conversation that we just had, because we're not looking for a specific, what we want to do is report back to the council. They gave you some 5 points to consider. You've just had a conversation about those 5 points specifically. Perhaps a motion could be, a motion to forward those comments onto the city council as articulated just a few moments ago when we were detailing A through E. And if you are okay with that, you can say so moved and have a vote on that and move it forward. The ARB will certainly cover the issues that they need to cover.
Sounds good to me.
So I would like to make a motion that we ask staff to summarize the conversation we've just had in regards to those 5 items and forward that to the council. And I will rely on staff's record keeping, because it's been good in the past, to do that. And if, so that's my motion, is that we ask staff to summarize our comments and send them to the council as representative of the board, and that could be a yay or nay.
One question. Could those be reviewed perhaps by our chair or co-chair of this board?
Why don't we have Matthew?
So what we do with with the PTC is when we have a discussion like this, we involve the chair and the vice chair in a chance to review the staff's summation of that. Perhaps acting chair would review those, and if you want to also appoint somebody else to review, we can share that to make sure that we've captured the board's comments.
Is that okay with the board? Sure. Okay.
Sorry, who would be the other person that we'd be sharing the comments with? Is it Board Member Bauer or who's? So we'll send it to you, and who's the other?
Who else? You and me. I volunteered.
Yeah, we'll have David and myself.
Okay, fair enough. And if
Yes.
No, we're all set.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of the stated motion?
Aye.
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 Motion stands approved
I think unanimously.
unanimously with all present.
Chair McKinnon, could I make a comment?
Sure.
I'd like to thank staff. This is obviously a difficult project, and also thank the owners for all the time and obvious money they've spent on this. And hopefully we can make a somewhat clearer path in future projects based on this conversation.
And thank you for the Apple building.
Would the board like to take a 5-minute break here before we proceed with items 2 and 3? Okay.
What are we doing next? We're not, are we doing anything on this art thing? Are we just hearing their presentation?
Just hearing your presentation.
Okay, because my wife is on the Art Board Foundation, so
Oh.
I would have to recuse myself if we're making any.
I absolutely can't sit this long.
You
You could stand up.
Yeah. Get your working desk.
You know what, it's, like the waste intelligence test, one of the questions was this one as well, Mega Summer. Well, what they do on these projects, when they have this mitigated negative declaration,
You want? Should we proceed with the 51 Encina? Because the art board is not here.
Do we lose the art board member?
Let's proceed with 51 Encina, and we'll pick up.
Is there anyone here from the art board?
Thank you, Board Member Bundenberg. So the master planning consultant for the item had to leave. They had another meeting they had to attend, I believe at 10:30. So staff has asked that that item be continued to a date uncertain.
Okay, we will continue item number 2. Moving on to item number 3, 51 Encina Avenue, request by Board Member Bernstein and Bundenberg for discussion regarding the property located at 51 Encina Avenue, which is designated Category 2, Historic Structures / Site in the Palo Alto Historic Inventory. Do we have a staff report?
Thank you, Chair McKinnon. Just a brief report. There were inquiries from several board members on the status of the physical status of this particular property. It's an accessory structure on a Category 2 rated inventory property. Staff did make a site visit and noted that there do appear to be some condition issues and potentially an alteration that may have been done without benefit of city review. Staff has prepared and sent a letter to the owner asking them to contact staff so that we can discuss and resolve any potential issues that might exist. The letter has been included in your packet, and I believe there may be a member or the applicant's representative may be in attendance at the meeting. And they are not. They indicated that they would try to be, but they are not here today. Thank you.
You have not heard back from the owners?
I have contacted them. They were made aware of the situation prior to receiving the letter, and then I did contact them after the letter also to invite them here to the meeting. They indicated that they would try to attend, but apparently they did not. They were not able to send a representative.
Okay. Would one of either Martin or Beth care to bring us up to date on what has happened to that project? We did review that several years ago, as I recall.
Yes, we did quite a long time ago talk about this, and it is a project that has had a long, long history because it goes all the way back to the Rancho days and a family that came here before there was a Palo Alto. And it was Rafael Soto and Louisa Greer and their expanded family. And the traces that we have left are the house, which is at 50 Encina, which has been taken care of, and I'm not sure what the current use of it is. It's not open to the public in any way that I can see. But also the barn was considered historic and was on the basic early forms that the city council approved when nominating it to the inventory. So the condition of the barn has worsened markedly between the time when the pictures were taken for the article up here and the current situation. The building is leaning more, the roof has, roofing has totally baked and is disintegrating. A structure has been built in front of the barn so that it's no longer easily visible unless you walk almost into the parking for the Palo Alto Medical Foundation, and it is demolition by neglect. Martin, did you have further things?
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Bunenberg. I also walked past the property and noticed the condition. Any drop of rain is going to go right through the roof sheathing. It's wide open. It's also leaning very significantly. So part of our debate is, well, if it gets tagged as a hazard, it might be asked to either be demolished for a safety issue. Certainly it can be salvaged. So if there's anything that our board today can discuss for requested actions from the owner, either putting in some temporary protective membrane on the roof so that when winter rains come, if they do come this year, that the building doesn't essentially disintegrate and evaporate from existence. If there was any structure there that was built without the privilege of any review or permitting, I guess a city code enforcement officer could request that the non-complying or not properly permitted structure or addition be removed. That would help be consistent with the Secretary of Standards of inappropriate additions. We're close to losing that structure. So what can the HRB discuss and request the owner to do? So, thank you.
I have a question for staff. Is it possible that the Historic Resources Board could, say, limit development on some other project owned by an owner if they don't maintain an historic structure? So, you know, this is the Steve Jobs approach to historic structures. You just let it go, and when it can't be renovated anymore, then they tear it down, and then you win. You get to destroy an historic structure.
So under the municipal code, the remedies for demolition by neglect essentially are fees. There are or penalties. There are monetary penalties that apply. I don't believe there is the ability to affect to affect the development potential of another property based on the status of a property that may not be in good condition.
So I'm thinking of a condition of approval for a different project, and we would say, well, one of the conditions of approval for project X is that you upgrade.
So again, under the code, there wouldn't be a nexus for those, so that would probably be challenged
So
in
the answer
court.
is no, most likely no.
Staff wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah. Okay, just asking.
Is there one more question for staff? I remember probably around the year, probably around the late 1980s, I recall seeing some ordinance about if there's a listed historic structure and it's not deemed by a code enforcer of being maintained properly, that there's a financial penalty per day of non-compliance with that requirement. I don't know if that's still an ordinance in the city of Palo Alto. Does staff know?
I do not believe that ordinance exists. The only penalties and enforcements I'm aware of relate to, not specifically to historic structures, but relate to structures in general, and the requirement that owners maintain buildings in safe conditions.
Yeah. So I guess so if there's, if a code enforcement officer looked at the property and made some decisions about the neglect, what actions can a code enforcement officer impose on the property owner? So,
Well, if there are any open entitlement applications or building permits, those could potentially be affected. That would be something that would be looked at. The code enforcement officer could also, working with other staff, determine that remedies are required for particular situations if they may be unsafe conditions. And then, of course, penalties could be applied. Those are all things that could be done in a situation.
Yeah. It's possible that penalties could be cheaper than protecting the building. So, good. Yeah. Thanks.
I had a chance to swing by the building yesterday, and the main house, the door was open, and so I went because I figured someone was in there. I didn't want to go around the back without asking permission. So I guess it's being rented out by Sutter Health. I mean, it looks like Palo Alto Medical Foundation owns it, but there was a gentleman in there, and I said, "Is it okay if I walk around the back and look at the barn?" And he said, "Sure, why not?" And so I went back there, and it is in quite a state of disrepair. It looks like it's about to fall over. And I asked him, I said, do you guys store anything back there? Do you use it for any? And he says, no, they never go back there. But what occurred to me was just looking at the building and thinking if they were required to rehabilitate it, they basically have to rebuild it or replicate it or try to salvage the material that's there and try to reuse it. But maybe this is just an opportunity for us to take a look at that incentive program, because maybe if there had been an incentive program all these years in place for these historic buildings, that maybe that would give the owners a reason to maintain them instead of neglect them. Obviously, these applicants had applied for the demo in 2004. It's in this information that they wanted to tear that down and build a garage. And I think the city had allowed it, but then realized, whoops, we can't let you do that because it's historic. So the owner wanted to do something back in 2004. And maybe with that denial, they have just let the project go because they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They can't tear it down and do what they want, but they can't really deal with the existing building as it is. So maybe if we, instead of penalize them, come up with a reward program or an incentive program like we had been talking about, the Mills Act, or something that encourages and supports some of these rehabilitation projects, because we all know that trying to save that building is going to be much more expensive than tearing it down and building something new. But if we could come up with a scenario where, hey, we want to help you, we want to maintain this as a resource for our community, we know it's going to be expensive, this is how we can help you. I don't know, maybe we can go back to that theme of what we'd been talking about, a system where we're encouraging and rewarding them, an incentive program. I think this is an opportunity to start talking about that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to make a comment at the end of the meeting, but I have to leave. So sorry to interrupt this discussion, but I'd wanted to thank you guys for, I think, what was a good, robust discussion on 429 University. Is really the first project in university to come to this council. And I think we are in a bit of a transition to enforcing some of our more qualitative parts of our ordinances in terms of massing and context. And so I think you guys had a good discussion, and I think we are in a bit of a shift here where we do have both quantitative and qualitative criteria in our ordinances. And, I think I would encourage you guys to continue to kind of push on those qualitative aspects. I think that's really your role, and it's very helpful to council. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and apologies for leaving early.
Thanks for your support. We appreciate it.
One more comment regarding the barn project. How's the board feel about continuing this topic to another meeting and then re-invite a representative from the foundation? It'd be great to engage in a conversation with them in public. Right now we're just saying, well, here's our wish list, but there's no owner to make a comment about it. So.
What's wrong with the public that's here?
Yeah.
Look, I think it's appalling that Sutter Health, even the Palo Alto Medical Foundation staff would allow this, to happen. Sutter Health doesn't care. They're a huge conglomerate. But Palo Alto Medical Foundation used to be local physicians. And my father-in-law was on the board there, and my first pediatrician was Esther Clark, and I went to the old Lee building. It was a local group, and I just think the fact that Sutter has it now, this is just so far under their radar, and they ought to be called on the carpet about this. I mean, if they want to tear it down, then come to the city and say, I want to get rid of it, or maintain it. It's not real expensive to maintain and refurbish a barn. There's nothing but structure. So, you could go in there, support it, probably, straighten it out a little bit, put a real foundation in it, put some shear panels in, and the thing would last another 100 years if they put a roof on it. So, I don't know, I think it's appalling that they're letting this go.
There's my thoughts, if the representative were here, my thoughts would include in a conversation with that applicant or the building owner about just the kind of like the implied social contract. If you own a historic structure and you are a historical, I mean, the company used to be in the Roth building, for example. So they understand, the beauty of historic things. So I would have a conversation with them about, their being good cultural stewards.
It'd be nice if some of the local papers actually wrote about this part of our,
So that's my comment. If the board feels like continuing the board and then re-invite and then see if there's an opportunity for a representative for the owner to attend.
I'd certainly support that.
I think Planner Weintraub wants to make a statement here.
Thank you, Chair McKinnon. Just a couple comments. I think it's important to understand with any particular property who the owner is and what would appeal to them. I think the discussion of incentives is valuable. I'm just wondering what type of incentive is out there now or could be out there that might appeal to this particular owner. I'm not sure there's, a lot of our incentives are geared towards individual property owners and the development of their properties. I'm not sure the Mills Act would necessarily apply in this situation, given that it's a medical foundation. I'm not sure their status in terms of tax. But I would say that probably one area that the owner is sensitive to is public relations and the image in the community. And I think appealing to the owner's sense of community, as I think Board Member Bernstein was indicating as well, would be a productive way to proceed with this particular owner. They certainly have, in my communications, they certainly don't seem to have any desire to create a problem or have an issue. It just seems to be something that wasn't on their radar. And I think they will be happy to discuss with the HRB how we can, make sure it doesn't get on anyone's radar and that it's being taken care of in a way that the community feels is appropriate.
Just one comment on this type of problem. I know several communities in the Cleveland, Ohio area have ordinances on their books where they have the building inspector go through the properties once a year and report any discrepancies or violations on it. They send you a letter from the building inspector, and they have in their ordinances fines that will go in effect if there's not compliance on that. So that's to keep the properties from deteriorating. It seems to be effective. You get a formal letter from the building inspector. That might be an approach that we can look at.
Couple kinds of thoughts. One is that in terms of not only as a protective measure of covering the roof, would also be to put in some temporary supports of simply the building, because it is leaning so much more than it was 2 years ago. And in terms of incentives, if we could offer something like the chance to build an attached gazebo and entertainment sort of structure out in the back so that they would have a positive sort of thing that they might get some incentives in that direction. Any thoughts on that sort of thing?
We have to look at the floor area ratios. We have to look at the floor area ratio for the property. Yeah, it's a good idea. Anyway, so how does the board feel about continuing and say if that makes sense for the staff to re-invite a representative, just so we can have, and I mean, as Mr. Weintraub just mentioned about, talking about public relations issue and being good stewardship and all that
You want to make a motion on that?
Sure, I'd like to move to continue this item to a date, it could even be a date uncertain based on response from property owner representative.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
And thank you, Matt, for sending that letter. That really is a major step ahead to simply put it out there, because clearly they are easy to forget.
Maybe in his free time, he could be a volunteer showing.
Oh, yeah, right. I need to volunteer to help Sutter Health save money.
I wanted just to add something just really quick about the agenda. It seems like, I mean, it looked like there were a lot of people here that were waiting for the second or maybe the third item that they just ran out of time. I don't know who puts the order of the agenda, maybe Diana, but it seems like maybe we could put some of the shorter things first, do you think? I felt really bad for those people. They sat and waited and they gave up.
Thank you. We will certainly look at that. I think in this particular case, we felt that the highest priority item probably should go first, and we felt it was appropriate for staff to wait while an applicant actually had their business dealt with, but it was unfortunate that item 2 wasn't able to be heard.
Right. And that's the historic, at least the time I've been on the board, it's always the most important thing is up first. But sometimes we change them, so maybe we'll see.
Yeah, it's a good thought, and we will certainly look at that.
Or maybe some of those secondary, applicants could come at 9 o'clock or 9:15. Instead of Kevin gets here at 8:30, they might be the first one, they might not.
I have to leave shortly, but we can change the order of the agenda without causing problems, right?
Certainly can.
So
We can do
maybe, so maybe we could say to a second group up, come at 9, and if we miraculously finished, in 10 minutes, we could do other business staff analysis. Anyway, let's move on because I have to go.
Do we have any board staff announcements?
None from staff.
Do we have a meeting in 2 weeks?
We don't currently have any applications scheduled, so we will have to wait and see if we do have the public art master planning. We also have the 51 Encina that was just continued. If those items are ready to go, or if another item, then we'll have a meeting.
Do you not have to publicly announce them 2 weeks before? Or
It's not required 2 weeks prior.
72 hours, okay. So
3 days.
the bottom line is we may have a meeting, but we're not sure right now.
That's true. We should know at least a week ahead of time whether or not we'll be having a meeting.
Okay.
I will not be here for our first meeting in October.
Okay.
I'll be out of town.
What date is that?
But it's the second Thursday.
It's October 8th.
October 8th? I will not be here either. My youngest daughter is being married in Dallas.
Okay. I will probably make a practice of contacting each board member prior to the meeting, so you'll probably be contacted by me just to verify that attendance. So I hope it won't be a problem if you get a call and we verify that information.
Good. One more little announcement. We have in our packet the California Preservation Design Awards, and Palo Alto has 3 recipients of Design Preservation Awards coming up at their October 2nd presentation. The Eichler Homes Office Landscape Rehabilitation in Palo Alto, the Rinconada Library, which of course is Old Main, and the Sea Scout Building. And that building had such a long saga and almost sunk into the bay before getting it saved. So it's nice to see Palo Alto being recognized.
Yeah, and you know, the Sea Scout building was in similar shape to the Rinconada barn.
Getting close. And the tide was rising.
Motion to adjourn?
I so moved.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned.